Okay, so let's make a bobblehead. The first thing I'm going to do is change the title, which you should always do in Tinkercad. And the next thing I'm going to do is import the object, which is a blank bobblehead template. It's an STL file. Okay, here it comes. There we go. Now we're going to add a ruler. You should always add a ruler to the work plane when you're working with Tinkercad. Drop it anywhere on the work plane and you get context. Now I'm going to 0 the object, meaning putting it at 0, 0. And the ruler will come in handy later. So we're going to build a mouth. We're going to use this object called a circular array. So we need to search for array in Tinkercad and then drag it on. And then we configure the parameters so we have one object in the array and change it to a custom profile. Then it will do live updates for us. Okay. So now we just move the handles on the Bezier curves so we get the shape that we want. In this case, a mouth. And just a couple more adjustments to do. I need to change the height and I need to rotate the object so that it's actually facing the right way. I'm just going to adjust the snap grid so that affects how far an object moves when you press the arrow keys, rotating the object. And now I need to align the object. Again, align is a crucial tool you must get to know well in Tinkercad. So just clicking on the tabs helps me align the objects together. And now begins quite a lengthy process of actually positioning the mouth so that I can cut out the mouth shape. I'm going to turn that solid mouth object to a hole, push it in to the main object and cut away a piece. A bit like that. So now we're going to create some eyes. The same process, drag on the circular array, change from 8 to 1 objects, change to custom profile, and then shape the profile to how you want the eye to look. This actually took me quite a while, so I'm just speeding this up here. We do all the same things, adjust the height, rotate the eye, align the objects together, and then move it into place. There is one thing I want to point out here. I need 2 eyes. So I'm just going to duplicate with Control D, and I'm going to mirror the object and move it across. Mirror is just M. They're mirroring it now. I've duplicated it. Now I kind of realized that this is a little bit more tricky. Made a few errors, so I had to keep repositioning the eyes, and eventually I went for a top view. You can do an orthographic view, switch to orthographic, but I remained in perspective view. But it allowed me to change the angle of the eyes, which gave me a much better context in which to create my eyes. And there we go. It kind of reminds me of the Scream mask or something like that. So now we are going to use the Scribble object, and this is quite interesting. It gives you a profile to create a 2D object and it turns it into a 3D, and it actually does this in real time. It shows you what it's going to create. If you look at the top right of that little window, it shows what's being created, and it was hollow, so I had to fill it in. This took absolutely ages, so I sped it up about 5 times. Once I've filled it in, I will resize it and place it on top of the head, and then I'll have to make it look somewhat realistic, which is probably the trickiest bit in this whole process. So this is going through all the same operations again. Now if you look at it now, it looks pretty terrible. I need to cut away a kind of a curve. In order to do that, I need to make that object, that hole, shape to the curve that I want to cut away, and put it on top of the head, duplicate and mirror it, and cut away the hole, or cut away the part of the object that I don't want. This took quite a while, lining it up. But Tinkercad does help somewhat. It gives you a shadow which shows you which bit is going to be cut away, which part of the object. Okay, so I'm just about there. There we go. Let's group it. So we do the cut by grouping everything, grouping the objects. I mean, there's some hair. The last thing that I wanted to do was a pair of eyebrows. Again, using a custom object with the array, we do exactly the same thing. I'm going to duplicate, mirror, and move the eyebrow when I'm happy with it. And there we go. One bobblehead. For the base of the bobblehead, we just needed to do a very simple thing. The original base is quite broad, as you can see, and I just wanted to cut out a smaller circle because I want to actually fix this bobblehead up onto my 3D printer, as you will see. So I got a kind of ring shape, made it into a hole, did a few measurements, some alignment, put it over the base, cut out a bit, and then I had to cut out a little bit more, and that was pretty much it. Oh yeah, I also had to cut a hole for the magnet. The magnet's 10 by 3, so what you've got to be careful is clearances on your printer. Now I know that 0.2 of a millimeter will do for me on my printer with my particular nozzle filament and settings. So I created a hole, my magnet, grouped it, inserted it, and grouped it. I had to move the work plane, which is quite an interesting thing, to the top of the base. Then I dropped it on the base, inserted it, grouped it, and there we go. One base. I'm using OpenSCAD here to configure the spring. The designer of the original Bobblehead also created a configurable OpenSCAD file whereby you can configure the size, number of coils, the weight of the spring. So I'm doing that. I wanted a bigger spring, a longer spring, because that's easier to put into the base of the Bobblehead. And once I did that, as you can see just there now, by using the slider, I'm just going to export it so I can print it. So we've created all of our models. Now we just need to slice it. Now, if you're doing an incursion with us, if you're a school student or teacher, you won't be doing this unless you print the models yourselves. The incursion really stops after the modeling. However, you can print them yourselves. And just for completeness, I'm just showing what I did. So I sliced it in Prusa slicer, 0.2 millimeters layer height, speed, as in fast, printed them all together. That's the slice model. Now you can see how it's going to be built. I'm showing you there by moving the slider. And I just need to then export it, and we're done. Okay, so next, here is the time lapse of the printing process. Nothing much to say here. Maybe other than the fact that sometimes getting the spring to stick is quite hard. So make sure your first layer is going to print. Glue stick helps sometimes. The final step is assembly. So I've got all my printed pieces, I've got my magnet, I need some glue that will stick non-porous surfaces together. This Gorilla glue is pretty good for the job. So the first thing I do is put my magnet in. And just clean off the excess glue, which I'm getting all over my fingers. The next step is to put the spring in the top, and normally you would use a tool for this. There's actually, you can't see it, but there is a rectangular recess to put the spring in, and you need to get the spring the right way round. Using the tool would have been easier, but because I made the spring longer, if you remember, it's actually easier to do this. And finally, well, nearly finally, insert the spring into the base. It does go in a particular way. I'm rotating it 90 degrees here, and now it goes in. And the last thing is just to put it on my printer. Yeah, it seems to work, but wood is not magnetic, so I'm going to put it on my stepper motor, one of my stepper motors, and there it goes. So next time I print, I'll get a nice bobbly head effect. And that's it.